So how good is this spell really? While there is some variance based on the creatures you animate, Animate Dead is an extremely powerful spell, not just for its spell level, but in general. It gives you potentially multiple permanent combat pets by simply using a spell slot. And I don't mean one spell slot per day, I mean one casting of this spell. Most other classes have to rely on class features for that, so being able to just spend a spell slot and some gold, and only once instead of every day, for extra minions in combat is very strong. Even basic zombies or skeletons can do work in combat by blocking enemy movement, and more powerful undead creatures more or less hit as hard as an animal companion of comparable hit dice. Potentially even harder if you animate something really powerful. There aren't many spells with an equivalent effect, and most of the spells that do this are far more limited in use. For its spell level, I give Animate Dead an 11 out of 10. It goes far above and beyond what you can expect for its spell level and has no equivalent at its spell level or beyond. While it has a few restrictions that make it less immediately versatile than, say, Summon Monster, it can give you multiple powerful minions you can use as cannon fodder, bodyguards, or even as a mount. For all its power, Animate Dead has a number of distinct weaknesses. First off, Animate Dead costs increasingly large amounts of money to cast. 25 gold pieces per onyx gem per hit dice of the creature you wish to animate is painful until your party starts to rake in several tens of thousands of gold every quest. And even then, having to repeatedly spend that gold to replace any minions you lose will chip away at your wallet. Some undead types are even more expensive. Inevitably, creating undead will take away from other stuff you spend your gold on, such as gear, magic items, services, or otherwise. The requirement for onyx gems also means that the aspiring necromancer has to go out of their way to acquire them. Onyx gems, in the real world anyway, are not particularly rare, but that's probably different in the world of Pathfinder, where good folk probably go out of their way not to mine for onyx, while evil civilizations or creatures will go out of their way to acquire and exploit onyx mines. It's likely somewhat of a black market material, not necessarily illegal, but if purchased in bulk, it'll likely draw unwanted attention. Second, your animated undead are not intelligent. They are mindless and as such can only follow simple orders. While some examples are given for orders you can give your undead, such as guard this area against anyone who tries to enter, or follow me, it doesn't specify that these are the only commands you can give. Thus, as a mindless creature, you can safely assume that you can give them any command you want as long as this command requires no critical thinking from your undead minion. For instance, you can order an undead zombie to open a door, but not to open a door if it thinks it's in danger. That would require it to critically consider what danger is, and thus it would not work. This naturally limits what you can do with your undead, as they don't function very well when separated from your direct commands. Third, the strength of your undead are based on the corpses you can collect and animate. Only living creatures leave corpses, meaning not everything can be animated, and any creatures that rely on class levels or special abilities will lose most of their power when they're animated as undead. If your party is in an adventure where most of the creature types you encounter are stuff that can't be turned into undead, like elementals, constructs, or other undead, you won't be able to expand your minion pool easily, or perhaps even at all. Some places might sell corpses, but that's a distinctly illegal activity that's likely not common even in the criminal underworld. Fourth, animating undead is an irreconcilably evil act. The spell has the evil descriptor, which means repeated use shifts your alignment to evil if it wasn't already, and most deities and societies don't just look down on animating the dead but actively criminalize it. A necromancer is rarely accepted warmly in any culture, one that raises the dead even less so. Fifth, your undead will follow your commands even if you are rendered incapacitated, but the moment you actually die, your undead become uncontrolled. Uncontrolled mindless undead are still mindless, but the default behavior for such creatures is to attack any nearby living creatures. If you're lucky, this means your undead continue to attack your enemies. If you're unlucky, your horde of undead now turns upon your remaining party members. How to optimize Animate Dead? Animate Dead, like many other spells, scales with your caster level. not your spellcasting modifier, as it has no upper limit to how much your caster level can boost its variable effect, which is the number of undead you can animate in one go and the number of undead you can control total. First, let's discuss our character's class and race. The best, most optimized way to maximize your Animate Dead is to have multiple buckets available for the spell. Normally there's no way to do this efficiently, as having 10 levels in Cleric and 10 in Wizard will give you the same size bucket as if you had 20 levels in Cleric alone. However, the Mystic Theurge class allows you to select one Divine Spellcasting class and one Arcane Spellcasting class and level up their spellcasting together as you invest in the Mystic Theurge class. If you combine the Juju Oracle and the Cruoromancer Wizard doing this, you can get two very large Animate Dead buckets, but doing this is complex and will cost you your 9th level spells. So let's not do this. Race is not that important, as no race gives favorite class bonus for oracles that will improve Animate Dead. Instead, we'll create a Juju Oracle with the Spirit Vessel's Revelation, giving us 6 hit dice of undead per caster level to control when using Animate Undead, while also adding the Agent of the Grave Prestige class, which allows us to add double the levels we have in this class to the number of undead we can control. This means that at level 20, with 15 levels in Juju Oracle and 5 levels in Agent of the Grave, we can control 150 hit dice worth of undead. We'll take some traits that actively improve Animate Dead. The Gifted Adept and Signature spell traits both increase your caster level for one spell. Pick Animate Dead for both to get +2 to caster level. Next we'll take some feats. First we'll need Spell Focus Necromancy, so we can take Mage's Tattoo Necromancy. This gives us Animate Dead at +1 caster level, as well as a new albeit weak spell-like ability. Next, Spell Specialization Animate Dead. This will give us +2 caster levels for Animate Dead. Then we'll also take Bloodmaid's Initiate Necromancy for another +1 caster level. Next we'll take Spell Focus Divination and take Arithmancy, which allows us a chance to increase our caster level by another +1 by making a Spellcraft check as a swift action before we use Animate Dead. Note that this is math heavy and can make your spellcasting more annoying for your Dungeon Master as well as for you, so you could skip this if you wanted. Next we'll need 3 Meta Magic feats. These can be any meta magic feat you personally prefer, but I highly recommend Reaching Spell, as it allows you to turn Animate Dead from a touch spell into a ranged spell, meaning instead of only being able to animate corpses in your reach, you can now animate every corpse in your line of effect. Tenebrous Spell, which gives an additional +1 caster level on Animate Dead if we cast it in the dark, and Quicken Spell because it is a universally accepted excellent choice. Then after we have taken 3 meta magic feats, we can take Spell Perfection Animate Dead. This not only allows us to apply 1 meta magic feat to Animate Dead without increasing its caster level, but it also doubles the effect of any feats that increase the variables of the spell, which in our case would be any feats that increase our caster level. This gives us +4 to our caster level for Animate Dead from this feat alone, due to all the previous feats we took, or +5 if we use Arithmancy. This gives us a total of +10 caster level to Animate Dead for an additional 60 hit dice worth of undead under our control. Lastly, items. There's a couple of things we have here to further increase our horde size. First, a dose of alchemical salt worth 5 silver pieces, if used as an extra material regent when casting any necromancy spell, increases the caster level by 1. A orange prism Ion Stone, while worn, increases all your caster levels by 1. And while that is an expensive effect at 30,000 gold, Ion Stones use their own equipment slots and won't interfere with any of your other wondrous items. Death Wine, a 2nd level spell, allows you to turn a potion into what counts as a performance enhancing drug for necromancers. The potion loses all of its previous effects, but instead for the next 1 hour per caster level, the potion, when imbibed, boosts the drinker's caster level on their next necromancy spell by a number equal to the spell level contained by the potion. Thus, if you use this on a potion that contains a level 3 spell, as a Death Wine, this potion will give you a +3 boost. This will set you back 750 gold pieces. We will also want a strand of prayer beads for 45,800 gold pieces, as the bead of karma in the strand can be used once per day to give yourself a +4 to caster levels for 10 minutes on all your spells. Finally, as we are a divine caster with light armor proficiency, we can also benefit from Purgatory's Cowl, a specific magic armor that costs 24,175 gold pieces, which gives you the special ability that whenever you reduce an undead creature down to 0 hit points or less, you can harvest its essence to buff the caster level of certain spells and spell-like abilities by 2. These include all the spells in the death domain, which includes Animate Dead. Just keep a skeleton or zombie, or better yet, a bloody skeleton on hand, so you can use this effect on it for little to no cost. The combination of all these effects gives us an additional 11 levels to our caster level, or an additional 66 hit dice of undead under your control. We will also cast the spell as a Tenebrous spell for an extra caster level. This gives us a total of 298 hit dice of undead under your control. That is truly terrifying. For the record, if you had a 5-man player group, all level 20, and each of them was playing a summoner with an Eidolon, and then you tallied up the hit dice of every summoner with their Eidolons, this necromancer would still have more hit dice worth of creatures under their command than that entire summoner group put together. In addition, there's also a few spells that can seriously amp up your ability to manage your undead army. Every aspiring necromancer should have Desecrate. Desecrate allows you to temporarily create an area in which negative energy effects are harder to resist, where undead gain combat bonuses, and any undead either created in this area or summoned into this area gain +1 hit point per hit dice. You can double this effect by putting an altar into the area to an evil deity, either one aligned with you or one aligned with undead, subject to Dungeon Master approval. On top of that, any Animate Dead spells cast in an area and with an active Desecrate effect can double the amount of undead it can raise in one go, from 2 hit dice per caster level to 4. Daywalker is also really good, as it lets you disguise one of your undead as a living creature without relying on illusion magic. It literally clads your undead in flesh and skin and makes it seem like it still exhibits the signs of life, even though it's actually undead. And anything short of direct interaction with the undead will not allow a skill check to see through the disguise. If you have an undead mount or bodyguard you want to take with you everywhere, Daywalker is a great spell to have. In addition, if you want to argue this to your dungeon master, you can also argue that the reason skeleton creatures lose their ability to fly non-magically is because they no longer have the skin and meat with which they usually keep themselves airborne. The Daywalker spell fixes that issue for a straight 24 hours, giving you a skeletal creature that can still fly, and unlike a zombie does not reduce its maneuverability. Just be careful with Dispel Magic, that can ruin your day if you're high up in the air. Finally, there's also an enormously powerful spell you should take as an aspiring necromancer, though oracles do not get access to it, namely Blood Money. Blood Money lets you create any region a spell needs as a swift action in exchange for taking 1d6 hit points and damage, as well as 1 strength damage for every 500 gold pieces worth of regions generated this way. This can very easily be used to create almost free hordes of undead. Just have a cleric or paladin on standby to cast the restoration afterwards. The problem with this spell. Now obviously the biggest problem with this spell is the sheer number of undead a player can have at their command. With no optimization, someone using Animate Dead at level 20 can still control 80 hit dice worth of undead, which can either be 4 undead creatures with 20 hit dice, or a horde of 80 skeletons, or anything in between. But that's not the whole story. First, having that many undead under one player's command is a nightmare for both the player, the dungeon master, and the rest of the party. Your turns will take forever as you manage all the different actions your undead creatures get, which becomes an even bigger mess if they all act with different initiative steps. You will have to do a monstrous amount of bookkeeping, keeping track of the damage each creature has taken, what their exact stat lines are, and which special abilities they do or do not have. Which gets even more complicated if your horde doesn't just consist of one specific type of creature or isn't raised as the exact same type of undead template. On top of that, while it can be argued that other classes with pets, such as the druid or summoner, get stronger pets, they only get one. And I feel that proper use of more advanced templates, such as the fast zombie, bloody skeleton, or God help you, the frostfallen creature, can go far in closing that gap, perhaps even overcoming it. All of this combines to make Animate Dead a hugely disruptive and unbalancing spell to let players fool around with. Sure, the spell has some limitations, but nothing a clever player won't be able to get around. Onyx gems are only a problem in the early levels when players are still relatively poor. But once you get into the double-digit levels, animating even very powerful creatures or very large hordes of undead won't put much of a dent in your wallet. If you're playing as a sorcerer or wizard, you likely won't even care that Onyx gems are in short supply, as Blood Money or Fabricate allow you to create them on the fly. Caster levels can, as you've already seen, be increased pretty significantly through an investment of golden feats, allowing you to raise large hordes even at low levels, and the use of bloody skeletons allows you to use your minions as sacrificial pawns, as they'll both heal and resurrect themselves, so you'll almost never have to worry about having to animate new undead. Some dungeon masters will argue that the best way to balance this out is to make it clear to the player that having a huge horde of undead following them around is going to attract quote-unquote unwanted attention. But if your argument is that large numbers of clerics and paladins serving good deities will now start attacking the party, I'd like to argue that this is a bad solution. This requires you to fight fire with fire, bringing in enough clerics/inquisitors/paladins of good deities to defeat the undead horde and the player party, which can only end in one of two ways. A. The player characters win, and even if they lose most of the undead horde in the process, they will just make a new horde to replace the old one, possibly using the bodies of the fallen force of good that you just tried to use to make your point. B. The player group gets wiped out as the other players refuse to allow their necromancer to get murdered by the forces of good, but fail to fight them back. The party gets wiped and everyone dies, and now the whole party has to create new characters. Saying this was the necromancer's fault is a weak excuse, because now you're punishing the whole party for something you allowed a player to do. This is why many dungeon masters outright ban the spell. It's a mechanical mess, and it gives an enormous amount of power to one player for a handful of gold and one low-level spell slot. So, having discussed what's wrong with the spell, we can now discuss how to fix it. How to improve the spell. One of the simplest ways to make Animate Dead far more manageable is to restrict players to allow only a single undead under their command. This puts it way more on par with what other classes that get pets can expect, especially when you consider the cost of casting Animate Dead and the fact that you need a suitable corpse to use it on first. This allows players to fulfill their fantasies of animating the bodies of the dead to serve as their minion. Even with this nerf, Animate Dead would still be an extremely powerful spell. Alternatively, you can also allow players to use Animate Dead as intended, but only on a strategic scale. Let the player use his undead to create an army to meet an enemy army on the battlefield, but not when dungeon crawling or adventuring. Players still get to retain the fantasy they were going for, but now it's not disruptive to the rest of the group. You could also alter the speed with which a player can gain power using this spell without changing it mechanically. Tell your players Animate Dead is now split into 3 versions. Weakened Animate Dead, can't use Lesser because that name is already used, Standard Animate Dead, and Greater Animate Dead. Weakened Animate Dead takes up a level 3 or 4 slot as normal, but only gives the player 1 hit dice per caster level to control. Standard Animate Dead is level 6, and gives the player 2 hit dice per caster level to control, and Greater Animate Dead is a level 9 spell that functions as rules as written Animate Dead. Once players gain level 9 spells, they become able to accomplish crazy stuff anyway, letting them control an undead horde at that level will be less of an issue. Finally, make the spell only usable on a tactical sense. Let the players create undead to guard their home base. Let them use them as a way to distract an enemy but not in actual combat. Let players leave them behind as undead landmines that trigger whenever someone walks by. Obviously, these changes would take a great deal of power of the spell away, but remember, it's already an incredibly powerful spell. Reducing it to something more acceptable for a level 3 or 4 spell should not be hard to argue for most dungeon masters. Making this video was easily one of the bigger projects I've worked on for my YouTube channel, but I'm happy I did. Most of the research I did for the mechanics of this spell came from a variety of sources, from suggestions from veterans I played with to various websites I scoured over the course of several weeks. I'd like to give special thanks to my current dungeon master, who has been very accommodating in allowing me to live out my necromancer power fantasy. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next video.